There may well be a lockdown in Melbourne, but we do have access to Zoom, and it can take us to exotic places. One such place is Jan Juc, and we're going across to Jan Juc via Zoom to catch up with Matty York. How are you, mate?
Very well, thank you, George. How are you going?
Oh, well, you can imagine how we feel, but you must be just cruising at the moment. Regional Victoria has opened up, and in your little village of Jan Juc, where the world is a very sweeter place, everybody knows everybody. How's life for you and the family?
Yeah, going well, thanks, George. You are right. We've been somewhat blessed down on the west coast, and we've been able to have a somewhat untouched, I suppose, life comparative to Melbourne in terms of lockdown. That said, I've been working from home since March. Look, it's been good though. I've still been able to access the ocean and still surf and whatnot. So it's been quite good, as good as it could be.
Design consultant for 20 years or so. You've worked throughout Southeast Asia. You worked around the world, but you found yourself that little piece of heaven, which is just marvelous. And you have, I think, how many children now?
I've got two boys.
Two boys?
I've got Will, two boys, yeah. Will's 13 and Ollie's 10.
Okay, so Oliver, or Ollie as you say, is an autistic child. And
That's correct.
I'm just wondering, how has he coped through the current challenges with kids not being given that continuity at school through the disruption we've seen?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. Ollie's had, he goes to a government school. He goes to Torquay College, and he has been, went to term one, had a fantastic teacher, phenomenal. And so he's really missed those second or terms 2 and 3. Fingers crossed, term 4 will go back so he can have that structure. I think he's really yearning that structure of school. And so, yeah, he's ready to return. I think we're all ready for the boys to go back to school. So that'll be quite a good time. So fingers crossed for term 4. Yeah.
Tell me something. What was it like when Ollie came into the family? Was it a big change, a major adjustment?
Yeah. Look, we obviously having Will first, our firstborn, we had I suppose a benchmark in terms of our firstborn child, and I would say probably around the age of 2, we started to notice some differences. Certainly the way delayed speech, and Em really noticed that. A mother's intuition must be heard. So we had this comparative, and so from about age 2, we saw some delays in speech and some communication. And then we started to realise that there were some broader elements, particularly around sensory connection. So Ollie was very hypersensitive to sound, and then very prescribed taste. We'd also noticed that Ollie would be quite comfortable playing on his own, and so really was quite happy with establishing his own sense of play and wasn't drawing off others, and that seemed to increase, so that contrast in social interaction became really apparent, and so we started to see these slightly different patterns that increased, and with that then started to breed, I suppose, a greater sense of anxiety for Ollie as he got older, and so through that process, we realised that we did need early intervention, and Ollie was diagnosed with autism at about the age of 4. So, yeah.
He's, from what I gather, great empathy, and he has a marvellous focus for things that he really enjoys, and he's high functioning, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. So in terms of the spectrum, which autism obviously is, Ollie is higher functioning, so highly empathetic, very, very passionate and loving and verbal. So we've been in really, that's been really, really grateful for that. And then the challenges, I suppose, being very much around social interaction and reading those social cues. But then the upshot, the opportunities, Ollie has eidetic memory. So he can, and which is phenomenal.
Memory like you wouldn't believe, huh?
Oh, it's a superpower.
So,
There is no
hang
other
on.
word for it.
Does that mean with all your work you don't need a hard drive?
Yeah, I've got one. I've got an analog and a digital hard drive with me at all times.
Oh, that's
So
amazing. That is amazing.
yeah,
Now, as a father, you have this not a comfort talking about autism because you've taken the time and you've discovered
yes,
the joys and the barriers, not the barriers, the limits, and how to work
yeah.
within them. What's he like with his brother?
Oh, look, there's a beautiful bond there, and Ollie really, as all younger brothers do, looks up to and reveres Will. It's in a really beautiful space now, but certainly that's taken time.
Yeah.
I mean, in those younger ages, in those formative years particularly, there was some real challenge on both parts there. And I think also as a father, I mean, there was a really strong time where, particularly at the diagnosis and the awareness of feeling, almost a blame, like what had we done wrong? Why had this happened to us? Was this immunization? Was it karma?
Sure,
was it,
sure.
the mind just goes all to, and of course we know it's not any of those elements, but for Will, and the relationship between Will and Ollie has certainly blossomed more recently. But in those younger years, where 3 years apart is, like 30, there was some challenges there,
Do they support the same football team?
sure.
Do they support the same football team?
No, they don't. They don't at all. So Will works for Geelong Football Club, and
why am I not surprised?
Ollie,
why? Sorry. Why?
Oh, I know. I mean, it's
That's great. Now
it makes sense. But Ollie barracks for Essendon because he is a huge lover of all things aeronautical. So I mentioned eidetic memory. So Ollie takes huge comfort in being able to quote aeronautical history, and his knowledge of planes is just like nothing else. In fact, I've got a story about that too. So I should.
Yeah. Okay. Take the moment. Go on.
Yeah, and look, it's an important story because it was one of those moments where I always was challenged, particularly on Ollie's diagnosis, about this notion of autism spectrum disorder. Disorder carries with it weight and problem. It's a negativity. Yet at that time, we were seeing optimism and opportunity and this brilliance. And so I was always really mindful and somewhat disturbed by that term of ASD, and I think we'll see a change there as well, because there is opportunity and brilliance and not necessarily disorder. Anyway, at that time we were watching Ollie really harbour this knowledge and fascination with anything to do with aeronautical history, and there was this calmness in that knowledge. It couldn't be changed. It's black and white. He could quote it, and it used to we used to wheel in the stories. And a friend of ours who's a pilot, Wayne, in fact, Marlene and Wayne, and Ollie was able to quote all of the flight paths that Wayne, who's a pilot with Jetstar, flies. And not only that, where they taxi and how they land at these particular airports. So he has this fascination and this memory above and beyond anything you've ever witnessed. And so at that time, I was starting to think, how important is this going to be for our changing world, and for a world that needs a broader view on how we can progress and move forward, a broader, diverse type of thinking. So the penny dropped when those sorts of things started to happen. And for me personally, it was then about, okay, so how do you then apply 20 years of designing cities and actually start to crack open this idea of inclusive design? So that's been a wonderful journey for me. And I feel so fortunate that Ollie has given me access to that broader type of thinking. So
that's an exciting discovery as a father, as a design consultant, as you have been for quite these years, to see things in a slightly different way, to bring new design patterns, schemes, and balance, I suppose. Is that right? Is that exactly what's happened?
Absolutely. Yeah, and to think about how our cities are growing, and let's look at our beloved city, Melbourne. That's going to go to 10 million people in the next 30 years, currently hovering at around 5.5. So the model of designing our Melbourne, we can't do business as usual. Now, we know we're not going as we exit a post-COVID environment, but how can we be thinking about all of those people that are going to need a broader voice, that are going to need a different model of consideration in terms of city design, the best city in the world? So that really fascinates me. Look, I'm really optimistic about the role of inclusive design, aligned with how we would think about city as infrastructure. It will play a role there. So it's going to be a wonderful time. And you probably sense my optimism.
Not only do I sense the optimism, but I sense a great pride. And not only in the fact that you're a father of 2 children, but you've discovered the joy and some of the extraordinary capacity in this young man. The man we know as Oliver or Ollie.
Yes.
And the fact that he has allowed you to think outside the square is super exciting. Yeah. It's super exciting.
Oh, it really is.
I'm just wondering if you've had the courage to allow him to enter a cockpit.
Well, I tell you what, we were fortunate to be in Europe last year. We were flying from Mykonos and on a smaller carrier, and Ollie was quoting to the crew the type and model of the plane, and beautiful Greece. The lady actually knocked on the cockpit door and said, "Look, we've got a guy here that knows a fair bit about this plane," and they ushered him in, and he got to sit in there, and I was a mess, because that was just his dream to see that. And he was telling the crew all about the plane and what they needed to do, of course. That was a beautiful moment. So last year he got that opportunity.
All I can say is next he has to learn the Greek language, and you've got a superstar in the making.
Exactly right. Yeah, well, it was hard to get him out of there. He had an absolute ball over there, I can assure you.
Matt York, we'd love to talk to you for hours, because there's a fantastic story, and as every page we turn, we keep discovering there's an even richer story behind. I hope we can do this again. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us an inkling of what life is like in Janjuk, beautiful part of Victoria. Now that things are opening and getting better, more excited to hear about the family and how the development of Ollie has changed all of your lives and made it richer. Yes. And it's also given you a fantastic new way to look at what you do for a living and have done for the better part of 20 years.
Absolutely, it has.
Matt York, thank you, mate. And we trust that even in this year of disruption, Ollie and the rest of the family bring you great joy.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time, George. It's great to share these stories. So thanks again. Much appreciated.
Matt York.